It's no secret that the One Piece world is vast. It's one of those animes that has so many interesting characters. You don't even have to be just completely invested in the main cast. There's other side characters that are intriguing as well. It's a world that has a whole bunch of different races or species that live amongst each other, like fishmen, animals that can talk, humans, animals. And the way this world is built, this is just another day in the life, if we're being honest. Giants, beings that are born bigger than humans and stuff, a giant race. In this vast world, you got pirates, but then you got the large organization known as the government. And when we're talking about the government, even though there's a lot of strong fighters in the government, there's only very few that's considered at the top of the food chain. Beings that are known as admirals. Today I'm going to be going over one of those characters. Like in this universe, there's like a government ranking system. Like the higher you are in the government ranks, more than likely you're a better fighter. For example, it's stated right here, like if you're considered one of the highest ranked fighters in the Marines, usually considered a Navy admiral. This being known as Aokiji, I'm going over today, is an admiral. Meaning that all these fighters you see down here, for the most part, he's above. Except for anomalies like Vice Admiral Garp or something. Even though he's a lower rank than Aokiji, that doesn't necessarily mean he's above him in particular. He's like an anomaly. He's not like your average Vice Admiral, you know? He's a ridiculously strong being for a few reasons. First of all, he can manipulate and become the element of ice. He has all kinds of techniques when it comes to ice, can touch you and freeze you. He's even one of the few characters that got a win on the main character, Luffy himself. He can blast ice out of his mouth, create weapons with creativity, make an ice sword. It's implied he has melee combat, sword to fight with, and can generate ice swords, multiple of them that are floating. He can layer his fist or hands with ice to improve his density of his fist to increase his punching power. Like in this occasion, he calls it ice glove. The funny part about Aokiji eating this devil fruit, yeah, you can eat devil fruits in this universe to gain superpowers, basically. He ate the ice fruit with the cost of him not being able to swim, of course. That's a heavy price, right? Luckily for him, he can kind of avoid this to some degree because he can kind of freeze the water before he falls in it, right? That's a good way to counter it. Like he rides his bike to freeze it, make his own tracks, for example. If he ever is about to fall in some water, he can just technically freeze it before he falls all the way in, so he can kind of avoid the weakness of the devil fruits, right? That's pretty cool. He's hard to hit because he can actually turn his body into actual ice. He's like a loggia, fluid body. Stuff like this is shown when even the strongest men in the world, like Whitebeard, use their power on him to, you know, make an earthquake. And even when he's shattered, he can basically just reform. Like even if you try to snap his body in half, like Nico Robin's power, trying to snap him and shattering him won't work because he can turn into actual ice and his body is fluid. So yeah, throwing physical objects at him most of the time won't work because the objects will just go right through him. Even the main character Luffy at the time period that has superhuman punching power, he just ends up getting frozen after the punch. So yeah, he has all kinds of ice techniques like giant icebergs. So when you see all these icy abilities, it's easy to assume that that's all he has to offer. But when it comes to Kuzan, or one could say Aokiji, that's definitely not it. Due to his high rank, there's certain abilities in the Navy that every character or technique, there's techniques characters can do that automatically have to know these techniques to even be a Vice Admiral or higher. And we know Aokiji is an Admiral level being. And that's this technique known as Haki. All Marines of Vice Admiral class and above have this ability. You got occasions like this where it's implied they're doing super senses or observation Haki when they know something's approaching. You know the technique when you see a character make their fist black or whatever? Because you know Aokiji's fist normally isn't that. You can kind of tell when a character is using it when they make their fist black in the show. Aokiji can imbue his hands with, one can say, invisible armor to increase his punches and stuff like that. This invisible armor around your fist is also how you hit beings that are intangible in this universe. You can even extend the radius of Haki. This is something Aokiji and the other admirals can do because one could say they can almost make a barrier because Aokiji and the other admirals can make invisible armor around their bodies to make like a barrier that can increase the radius of their defense like this or some crap. You see what I mean? So naturally, Aokiji isn't the only person that can use this type of Haki. That means people other than him can actually hit him. So that's when Aokiji has to use his observation Haki, or one could say his reflexes, to kind of move out of the way. Or similar to certain characters in this universe, they can actually reshape their body because their body's fluid. One could say Aokiji can do this too. That would explain how he's able to be impaled and not die. One could say Aokiji morphed his body similar to how beings like Katakuri can do it. Like he avoids the hit by making his body a different shape. One could say Aokiji did this to avoid being stabbed like this. Does that make sense? Because if he didn't, he shouldn't be alive being stabbed with Haki. But then there's the matter of Okiji's physical strength, without counting Haki or Devil Fruit powers. When you think about the fact that he can put invisible armor around his fist to make his punches stronger, and the fact that he has ice abilities, it's easy to forget that his actual muscles themselves are strong without even counting this Haki ability to put armor armor around your fist. Without even counting that, his muscles and strength in general, super strength, is just crazy. Simply because nobody's born just Admiral level. He had to, believe it or not, work his way up to these levels. It was off screen, of course, but yeah, he rose through the ranks in order to achieve this high rank, aka getting stronger as time goes by. I know it's hard to believe he was ever a kid. Sometimes these type of things we forget. He was once a noob, like everyone else, but as he aged, been in the Marines, went on new adventures, it doesn't take rocket science to know that his strength gradually increased over the years. I mean, he was a part of the Marines, but now currently he's a part of Blackbeard's pirate crew. He's the 10th Titanic captain of the Blackbeard Pirates, yeah, but when it comes to his physicals, without relying on his devil fruit powers or his hockey, he was trained by the man, the myth, the legend himself, Garb, can use battleships as punching bags because their armor hulls have been caved in with punches. This is because of Garp's daily routine. Aokiji did this with straight punches as well because they said the rules were no hockey or super abilities or devil fruit abilities. His strength had to be earned. Matter of fact, during this time period, this shows that Aokiji had super strength because Garp said, remember, no hockey, this is training. Aokiji at the time couldn't even, if he wanted to, he was too young to even know the technique of hockey at that time period. This pretty much proves that even if you took away Aokiji's ice abilities, his bare fist without enhancements of hockey, one could say his latent inner energy, he can manifest and give himself invisible armor. He doesn't need that invisible armor to tremble or cave in battleships with his super strength or just punches in general, thanks to his training with Garp back in the day before becoming an admiral, when he didn't know hockey. But now he can increase his density with ice and hockey and stuff. Imagine how hard he hit now. More evidence of his physical strength is that time he got an entanglement with, clash with characters we know have superhuman strength, like Zoro, for example. Notice how they're clashing swords. Zoro can't outright out-muscle him. Even though Zoro has the strength to lift buildings, Zoro can't just push him back. If Aokiji didn't have super strength as well, when these two clash swords, it should be similar to occasions like this, where this character starts pushing this character backwards this way when they're clashing swords. But that's clearly not the case when it comes to Zoro and Aokiji sword clashing. Matter of fact, the character known as Sanji that can kick gigantic alligator creatures can't just overpower Aokiji's arm even though Aokiji blocked his kick. So it's clear that Aokiji, if he was put in the same situation, if he wanted to, he can lift this building up just like how Zoro could if he was put in that same situation as Zoro. I mean, he already matched his strength, shown Zoro can't overpower him physically. This is back in the day too, so if anything, Aokiji's probably physically stronger than him at this point in the series. By a lot, without even counting hockey and stuff. But I'm just getting started, let's get it. When you add in the super strength he has with his hockey and all that good stuff, oh man, he's a force to be reckoned with. Somewhat decent with a sword. Why even bother making an ice sword if he didn't have any type of skills with it or training with it? Why not take advantage of his ice constructs he can make? He can make ice spears. One could say he has blast power. Hey guys, people that watch One Piece, have we ever seen Aokiji out of breath after using this massive amounts of ice? Making long ice tracks that can lead to the next island? Because if he shoots hardened ice at you like a bow and arrow, that's like a blast. To some degree, right? Like in this occasion, he touched some water. You can kind of get an idea of his blast power by how much he can freeze in an instant. Like this big old giant monster that was way bigger than him, Aokiji freezes the monster instantly, basically, before it even had time to reach himself and the water around him. Not to mention the ice was so cold and dense, they thought the sea itself froze over. And Aokiji, out of his mouth, stated that this ice should hold for about a week. They can cross the sea now because the sea became an island. Now you can go to another island. When it comes to abilities like this, it's hard to measure when it comes to calculation of how much energy you can produce on the spot, but like how big of an ice attack can Aokiji land within an instant or in the span of a punch? The length of a normal punch we know in real life, half a second, you know, stuff like that. Like there's implication that he did this all in an instant, for example. So he can produce this much ice without no effort really, without being out of breath. Tsunamis, for example, obviously have different power levels, but there was this character in One Piece that did a tsunami that looked like it was about to cover the entire island, right? Aokiji, this seems to be low difficulty, with ease blasted the water and froze it on the spot. He can freeze mountains of like literal mountains of water in an instant. I mean, if Aokiji has the power to just instantly freeze big chunks of water, in real life they can get pretty big. Depending on the level of tsunami, one can say they can even get bigger than the Empire State Building. Aokiji can just freeze stuff like this on the spot to where they don't even fall or move no more. That can kind of give you some perspective on how hard or how layered he can make his ice to where they just freeze on the spot. And Aokiji does this kind of stuff and makes it look easy. And the same thing goes for the surrounding area of water. He also froze in Marineford. Just to give you an idea of how much he actually froze, guys. So there was these waves, these giant waves coming from this side and on this side. Aokiji himself had to freeze. And as you can see how this island looks, is definitely at least the size of multiple city blocks, with this super huge building being like the size of a small mountain. This is how this area looked before Aokiji froze it. You see the water right here is not frozen. And this is how the area looks after Aokiji froze it. The amount of ice he had to produce looked like he froze enough water that could cover up this whole island, basically. He can produce island-sized amounts of ice in pretty much an instant, one could say, and froze the surrounding area. This area right here, he also froze. Like, when you see occasions like this, it makes you wonder, couldn't Aokiji just level the entire island? Because all he would have to do is just jump really high in the air. Because couldn't he just create his own gigantic ice ball bigger than an actual island itself and just have it land on everybody and just crush everybody with his ice blast attack? Technically, he could just level an entire city or multiple cities or an island just by creating a super ice ball and just have gravity land on it with his blast in pretty much an instant if he wanted to, right? He should technically be able to just sink an island this way, right? I mean, he can literally stop island-sized tsunamis with his ice freezing ability that fast, meaning he can produce a massive amount of ice in pretty much an instant. When you can produce so much ice to where even characters that are this close to you about to attack you and they get frozen instantly, it just gives you an idea of how much he can freeze instantly, of how destructive he can be. Ice, one could say, is a hack, because if you freeze somebody, you pretty much lower their durability, because when a character's body gets frozen, they get real brittle and they're easy to break and shatter. So in a way, you can actually be stronger than a character that has ice abilities, but you can still slip up and get a loss against them because of hacks abilities like this. But super strong top tiers can break out of the ice if they have haki to give themselves invisible armor and stuff of that such, or his person that taught him how to fight in the first place can break out of his ice like Garp. Another great example is how he can produce a lot of ice on the instant. Like this character, like Doflamingo, the Joker of One Piece, basically was trying to kill a character. Aokiji was able to freeze him enough to make him stop his attack from killing one of his buddies, along with producing ice that covered a nice chunk of the island. Impressive. Doflamingo is a being that makes jokes out of a lot of different Vice Admirals. That kind of shows you the difference between your average Vice Admiral and an Admiral level being like Aokiji, for example. Because as strong as Doflamingo is, he just walked right past Aokiji and didn't want to fight him, basically. Notice how Doflamingo can easily slice up meteors with his cutting power and stuff. He still didn't want to pull up on Aokiji, you know? Even when he was a Vice Admiral himself, he could take out other Vice Admiral tiers, like Saul, this giant, for example. It lets you know, even back then, he was probably stronger than your average Vice Admiral, if that makes sense. Kuzan. Talking about power to level cities, you guys already know how I talked about the Admiral ranks and stuff like that. A fight between them two, close in power and strength. In fact, the battle between these two happened off screen, but it was a ridiculously close battle between Magma, because the other Admiral had Magma powers, Aokiji had ice. That lets you know that Admirals are comparable to one another, because the battle lasted for 10 whole days, because they were almost equal in strength. Aokiji did lose this confrontation, but it shows that Admirals are close to where it's a ridiculously high difficult fight between two Admirals. 10 days. Like, I don't even know the physics to this, but their battle was so intense that it completely changed the weather of an entire island permanently. Like, how does that even work? That would mean like their attacks had to affect the weather patterns above them or some crap or whatever. Change the island's climate because of their fight. The whole land was changed. The man can definitely level an island if he really felt like it. That's the reason why he's missing a leg. He has to keep remaking it out of ice, because that's what happened when Admirals fight. They're evenly matched, basically. Aokiji made his body riddled with scars too. And you know how other Admirals like Akainu can make magma? Giant fists? Who's to say Aokiji couldn't make some giant ice fist that's bigger than islands enough to level an island if needed? The reason why he fought Akainu was to see who deserved the promotion to get the Fleet Admiral and upgrade from the Admiral position. You know he's pretty powerful because the former Fleet Admiral nominated Aokiji. You know, you see where I'm going? He lacks screen time, so it's hard to really get an understanding of his speed, but it's implied he's ridiculously fast, being able to move like a blur, and move fast enough before people can react. Doflamingo is a kid that has observation haki, but somehow Aokiji was able to get this close to him. This could imply speed, but this is vague on how he did this. Since it's confirmed that Admiral level beings are comparable in power, I think we can all safely assume that even though this guy is made of light, he can't just speed blitz the other Admirals. It's already confirmed that Admirals are comparable to each other, so it's a fair assumption to assume that Aokiji can react to Kizaru, another Admiral level being. This can give you some essence of Okiji's fighting speed, which he probably has thanks to observation haki, helping him predict what's going to happen next, and him just having raw reflexes because he's an Admiral. How fast do you think Aokiji is? Beings on a mighty pirate crew of Whitebeards like Jozu, one of the commanders, Jozu, a being that's strong enough to throw big chunks of ice that are even bigger than giants. Okiji's ice is this lethal. Aokiji can mess up a commander with his ice. Not only this, even strong beings like Cracker, somebody that gave Luffy a weaker version of Luffy than he is now, serious issues, the same Luffy that could easily level mountains in his base form, like Mountain Men like he did here, Luffy can do. He can damage. Luffy can actually fold a nice chunk of Dressrosa the island, and Aokiji can handle beings this strong. Alright, pretty much to prove he deserves his Admiral rank, you know his former mentor, Garp, he actually got in a slugfest with him later. So when you add on top of the fact that Aokiji can punch really hard because of his training, so his physicals are pretty strong. I mean, just for reference, right? Garp has other proteges, like even characters way down here in a lower rank than Aokiji, in captain rank, have enough punching power. Like Kobe, thanks to Haki and stuff and Garp's training and training extra hard, he can punch hard enough to break mountain-sized structures, or a being that's literally an island, a living island being. Like this being has eyes, like it's an actual island being. This can give you an idea of how strong Aokiji's physicals or punching power has to be with Haki, because if lower tier characters that are nowhere near Admiral rank can do this, without even including his ice, I don't see no reason on why somebody like Aokiji himself couldn't punch Mountain apart with his physicals or Haki mixed into it as well without even counting ice. I don't see no reason why Aokiji couldn't do this as well if lower tiers like Captain rank, nowhere near Admiral rank beings that are also under Garp's tutelage can do this. I don't see no reason why Aokiji couldn't do this as well, especially current him as a grown man and stuff. Not to mention Garp himself, even at old age, can do damage to a literal island person, a being that ate the island fruit. Like, yeah, you can eat a special fruit in this universe and actually be able to become islands. Garp can damage these beings, same with Kobe, or weaker being in Admiral rank. Garp is a being that's implied that he could destroy the entire island. Yeah, this literal island man said this, a being that can make his arms mountain sized because he's the actual island. We've seen Aokiji actually get in a slugfest with Garp, the being that can damage islands, or a being that's literally one with an island. Each of them punching each other. Both of them can make gigantic classes of Haki that can blow away multiple buildings basically, or debris, and blow each other back. Aokiji slugfesting with a being like Garp is impressive, especially pretty much stalemating him in this clash, because they pushed each other back, so this implies like a stalemate when it comes to this exchange of blows. I mean, Garp is a being that can, it's pretty much stated in the same video, he can blow away an island. And it's not an exaggeration because he can blow away an entire town, basically. Multiple buildings or multiple city blocks or town he can blow away. Aokiji, hardening his fist with Ice Glove, Haki, and his physical strength put together, can clash with Garp in raw power. So it's heavily implied with his physical strength, mixed with his ornament Haki, enhancing his blows. All this put together, one could say he can tremble an entire island, level on multiple towns or a town, or his punch can split an island down the middle. Considering what lower rank Marines can do, and he's way above them lower rank Marines. Because if you're a One Piece watcher, you know this, but whatever this guy can do in physicals, of course, Aokiji can do better. He's just stronger in general. Like, I'm not trying to say he's equal to Garp or nothing, because he did get jumped and got impaled here when he was fighting Aokiji. Aokiji can pretty much solo a lot of the Blackbeard pirates, and Blackbeard was like, what the heck is going on? Even freezing a giant entity that's bigger than battleships. This being is super huge. About dang near close the size of mountain-sized buildings, basically, like in the Marine Fort. Having comparable size to this building, for example, like these little smaller buildings are nowhere near the size of them or these ships. This being is so big, it even makes oars look small. Even giants and even Yonko tier beings like Big Mom, Kaido, and even Luffy look ridiculously small in comparison to this being size. Aokiji had no problem freezing. Yeah, you gotta have Haki to counter him. If he can freeze big entities like this without them being able to break free of this powerful ice. Blackbeard had to beg him, undo your freeze. His crewmates are frozen. I mean, technically, he even froze the being that can literally become one with an island. It's hard to pinpoint the level of a being like this, but there's heavy implications. We still haven't really seen these Admiral level beings go all out yet. What do you think the limits of them are? Do you think he could possibly, I mean, that's a big possibly. Do you think he can do what the Yonkos can do? Like do the classic splitting sky feats when two beings with Conqueror's Haki clash and stuff. I want to hear what you guys think Aokiji is capable of. I personally think he can split an island right down the middle by making his own giant sword to just cleave through the entire island, but that could be just me. But what do you guys think? Thanks for the donations, everybody. Respect the former Admiral Kuzan. I'm glad you are enjoying your time on the channel. Make sure you check out the playlist on the channel to see other How Strong videos. If you like what this channel is offering, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys later.